Hey everyone, welcome to The New Populist. I'm Dave Brown. If you are new to the channel, please like and subscribe. Now we're all watching Justin Trudeau go full Castro up in Canada, and he is doing something unprecedented, which is using emergency powers in peacetime. In this case, it will be against his own citizens. Now, there are conservatives in this country who are going, that's Canada. They have a different system. They're closer to England than they are United States as far as their system, and they don't have the same protections that we have, and that we shouldn't worry that something similar couldn't happen here. And I want to challenge that, because we do have provisions here that are awful close to what is happening now in Canada. But first, let's look at what Trudeau said and what his finance minister said as far as the actions they're going to take. Check out this clip.
Here in our capital city, families and small businesses have been enduring illegal obstruction of their neighborhoods, occupying streets, harassing people, breaking the law. This is not a peaceful protest. At the borders in different parts of the country, the blockades are harming our economy and endangering public safety. The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations.
First, we are broadening the scope of Canada's anti-money laundering and terrorist financing rules so that they cover crowdfunding platforms and the payment service providers they use. These changes cover all forms of transactions, including digital assets, such as cryptocurrencies. The illegal blockades have highlighted the fact that crowdfunding platforms and some of the payment service providers they use are not fully captured under the Proceeds of Crime and Terrorist Financing Act.
So because of the threat to the economy, to public safety, Trudeau is expanding the emergency powers to bolster law enforcement, right? And then his deputy prime minister, the finance minister, said they're going to stop certain funds from reaching the truckers because it's funding an illegal activity. And that's a fairly draconian step there. And the question is, again, in the United States, is there something similar? And I think you know where I'm going to go with this, because I have made this point in other videos talking about the Patriot Act. And so I will go right back to that. And I want to go through a couple of things. And again, can we see something similar here? Now, the Patriot Act, it covers domestic terrorism. Now, this is a new thing, Section 802 of the Patriot Act. It expanded it from just being international terrorism to domestic terrorism. And according to the ACLU, they thought, this is back in the mid-2000s, that the Patriot Act could be used against political opponents. Now, what's funny about this is that if you go to the Department of Justice website, they actually reject this notion, right? They say, no, okay, we're expanding it to domestic terrorism, but they say the scope is extremely narrow. And their words exactly are this: Section 802's definition of domestic terrorism is extremely narrow. Indeed, it is much narrower than the pre-existing definition of international terrorism. Individuals and groups would be eligible for surveillance under this definition only if they engage in criminal wrongdoing that could result in death. So, according to the DOJ, they're saying this is just for these individuals and organizations that might kill somebody, or actually, in their words, result in death. Now, I personally find that a bit vague. A lot of things can result in death, and it doesn't necessarily imply that the action is intending of causing a death, like a first-degree murder, a premeditated killing of somebody. So that wording itself there, I find suspicious. Now, we think about January 6th. According to the left and the media, that was the third Pearl Harbor, right? After Pearl Harbor, and then 9/11, and then this January 6th was the third Pearl Harbor and the second worst attack on the homeland. So right there, even though there was some violence in there, some people were fighting the police, but they were already equating it to something extremely violent that could potentially cause death. And of course, Ted Cruz jumped in and called it terrorism. He was called out on it by Tucker Carlson. Then he sort of flip-flopped a little bit. And my point has always been the same about using terrorism. When we talk about U.S. citizens, it's a dangerous step in allowing our government to use the tools in the Patriot Act against us. So now we see in Canada, they have the emergency powers. We have the Patriot Act. They're going to stop these funds going to these groups. And here in this country, we have this. We have civil asset forfeiture. And it says, according to ACLU, the government can seize and or freeze the assets on the mere assertion that there is probable cause to believe that the assets were involved in domestic terrorism. So again, Canada, the United States, are we really that different? And it really comes down to, again, whether or not the government can use these powers is if they can classify us as being terrorists. Now, listening to Justin Trudeau, he didn't say that, but you could definitely see his language moving in that direction. And it's not a leap to say that eventually, if things got worse and things became more contentious, that he could, jump to that next level of saying that they're committing domestic terrorism. And that is definitely not unreasonable to think that in this country that there aren't Democrats who would point to truckers protesting and say, hey, they're domestic terrorists, use every tool the government has in order to stop them. And that's unfortunately the direction we're going now. So we had this potential trucker thing that was supposed to happen around the Super Bowl. It never did. It may or may not materialize, but again, the government's already paying attention. We see what's going on in Canada. DHS is talking about the trucker protests here and white supremacy and all that, nonsense about it being, extremist. We're right there at that precipice, of calling it domestic terrorism. And once they go to that step, they got all the tools they need. They got the Patriot Act, and there are people sitting in D.C. who were held in solitary confinement, unable to see a judge for months because I'm not sure if they weren't necessarily called domestic terrorists. And that's actually even worse. They weren't called domestic terrorists, yet they were robbed of their civil liberties, and they were held in that D.C. jail for an extended period of time without any trial or the ability to get from a judge and get bail or whatever. So if we go to that next step and start calling people domestic terrorists, it is a very dangerous place to go, and we are right there. So we need to pay attention and make sure we don't get to that place. Well, that's it for now. Again, if you are new to this channel, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.